Well, let me ask this too. Didn't Ford also do a whistle stop tour?
Oh, he
through
sure
Michigan?
did.
Remember
He sure,
that?
that was Jerry Rowe.
That was Jerry
came
Rowe.
up with that. It was wonderful.
Yeah, great idea. Were you on the train?
Yep, sure was.
Yep.
Sure was. A lot of fun.
That was a big success.
A lot of fun.
That helped
lot
him.
of fun.
Once he got on the ballot, maybe that was instrumental to his
Yep.
getting a nomination.
Yep.
So this was all for the presidential primary.
That's right.
Which in those days was much later than it is now. Wasn't
Yes.
it like in May?
Yes,
I think
yes,
it was in May.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, May 20th, I think
Right.
it was.
So you're in Kansas City, and you got a really close vote. Even though Ford won the Michigan primary, Reagan then won a lot of later primaries, as
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
down south.
Yep.
So what actually went on to lead to finally Ford winning it?
I believe that in Kansas City, there was just enough. Reagan was looked at as still a little bit of an outsider, a little bit, and if you in effect toss out an incumbent, what does that say about your chances? Doesn't that really mix things up for November?
Well, wasn't there a big deal, although, with Reagan picking Richard Schweikert, the U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania, as his running mate?
Yep.
Announcing it beforehand, trying to pry the Pennsylvania delegation loose from Ford. And I think there were some Michigan people involved in trying to hold that Pennsylvania delegation for Ford.
And it was tough. It was very tough. But one of the things that helped us is that when we had campaigned we were campaigning to get the convention to Detroit,
right.
And we did a little trading on that too.
So you were already lobbying and working toward getting the convention in 1980.
Sure.
Beginning right there.
Sure.
Okay. Working for those 3 or 4 years up to 1980, what really clinched the deal getting the convention for Detroit?
We said Michigan is going to be a battleground state.
Right.
And even Coleman Young, the hardcore Democratic mayor of Detroit, will kind of quiet down if we go to Detroit.
Right.
And that's what sold it.
That's it. What about Odie Fish from Wisconsin? Do you remember him?
Yes, I sure do.
Big cigar smoker?
Yep.
I heard they took him over to Windsor and got him a lot of Cuban cigars that he couldn't have gotten otherwise.
There were a whole lot.
Wasn't he chairman of the site selection committee?
Exactly.
I think maybe that was...
Plus, I'll tell you the other thing we did.
Yeah.
When we brought the site selection committee here, the preliminary visits,
right.
We took them to every upscale. We took them to the Edsel and Eleanor Ford estate. I mean, we showed them elegance. They were really impressed,
right.
Because they kept thinking of Detroit as the Motor City. What they didn't realize is the Motor City had made a heck of a lot of money off those motors all these years, and there was a lot of wealth. And we showed them all of that.
So did you feel that Michigan really came through when it had its convention here? I mean, the National Republicans were really pleased.
They thanked us profusely. They really did. They were impressed.
Yeah.
And but I'll tell you who else helped us was Windsor. Windsor knocked themselves out to help and it was the only convention where delegates were put in two countries. America and a foreign country.
Right.
Only one. They love that.
That's true.
And Windsor, boy, they made it so easy. They waived all of the usual border things and everything. And those buses, if there was a convention bus, man, it went through the bridge and the tunnel right off.
Okay. Peter Fletcher, you were national committeeman for the Republican Party for 5 years. Were you always a Republican? Was your family Republican? How long were you a Republican? Tell us the story.
My father was an FDR Democrat. My mother was a Wisconsin socialist. So in order to be a rebellious youth, I decided I'd be a Republican. And my great aunt from Coldwater, Edith Phelps, a contemporary of Bob Teeter,
right,
pinned a Fitzgerald for governor pin on me in 1938.
Frank Fitzgerald, the Republican.
And I was very intrigued. What is that all about? And that kind of got me started in following politics at a very young age.
Did you meet Frank Fitzgerald?
Oh, yes.
How many governors have you met?
I have met every governor that was governor during my 76 years here on this earth.
Wow.
And I've met 7 different presidents.
Okay.
And I don't think there are too many people who have done that. And I found it very interesting.
Who was the earliest governor of Michigan you met?
It would have been Wilbur Brucker. He was governor, right? He was
31 and 32.
Yep.
Now, of course, you were barely alive or not even alive at that time. You must have met him much later.
Yes, much later. I was born on February the 29th, 1932.
Oh, that's right.
So
you're much younger than I thought, right?
Oh, 19 birthdays.
Exactly. You're only 19 years old.
Right, exactly. It's wonderful.
A leap year baby. But Wilbur Brucker was Secretary of the Army, I believe, in the Eisenhower administration.
Yes, that's where I met him.
Probably
that's where I met
under
him.
those circumstances.
Yep. But for example, Pat Van Wagner in 1940, he was on the Mackinac Bridge. That's where I met him.
Right.
So there were various
How about
reasons.
Frank Murphy? Did you meet Frank Murphy?
Yep, because guess what? my great aunt and uncle, Donald and Jerry Bacon, were his campaign managers in 1934 and 35.
No kidding.
So later on, I met him through that connection.
Wow, what a story.
Oh, yeah.
Comstock?
Comstock, same. There was the same thing. There was something. Jerry Rowe was he was always interested in former governors and everything, and he would have various get-togethers.
Yeah.
And there was some get-together that Jerry engineered, and that's how I met him.
And William Comstock was there. He was alive.
I think
he was the governor in 33, 34.
That's right.
2-year term.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. So what about Harry Kelly?
Oh, Harry Kelly. I knew him quite well. Don't you remember the polio voting to vote? And they mixed up the vote on the polio. I mean, on the margarine vote and the Harry Kelly vote in that election. Big fuss.
Yes, that was 1950. I think.
Yeah.
When he came back and tried to beat Soapy.
Right.
And so, how about Kim Sigler? Did you meet Kim Sigler?
Oh, did I ever? And Kim Sigler was right out of Central Casting. He looked like a governor should look.
He looked like a governor.
He was tough. I was a big fan
Immaculate
of him.
suits.
Oh, my gosh.
And flew airplanes.
His own plane and everything.
Right.
Oh, he was something else.
He was something else. And Soapy, of course, you know well.
He married a girl from Ypsilanti.
That's right.
Right. So I can show you. It was right down the street. Here's where he was married.
Right. That's right.
And so I would see the governor's car parked out in front of the Quirk home here in Ypsilanti fairly often.
I'll be darned.
But Soapy was I could have disagreed with Soapy on a lot of things, but he was certainly dedicated to the public interest. He really was.
And John Swainson, I'm sure you saw many times.
John Swainson. And I'll tell you, the reason I'm a bigger fan of John Swainson, he got himself into a lot of trouble, but after he served as governor, I knew of at least a half a dozen occasions where he visited people at the University of Michigan Hospital, especially kids who had an accident or something, had legs gone.
Right.
And he would walk into that room and he'd say, "Kid, you think your world is over. You think your life is done. Watch." He would drop his pants and show that he didn't have any legs either. And he'd say, "I became governor of the state of Michigan. You can do anything you want to." And the doctors would thank him profusely.
Sure.
"Governor, you have just done things for that kid that no doctor could ever do."
Right, absolutely.
He was wonderful about that kind of thing.
That is,
I was a big fan of John.
Right, that's really something. So you've got George Romney coming into office, defeated John Swainson in a pretty close election in 1962. And you got to meet George Romney, as you mentioned, at the Con.
Right.
What was your... Go ahead.
But then I was also involved, beginning the spring of '69, Romney started his sort of pre-presidential. He was being conjectured, the next time around. And I traveled with him for 13 weeks as chief of advance.
Well, no, wait a second. That must have been in 67, probably.
67, excuse me, 67,
yes.
right. Getting ready for 68.
Yeah.
And so I met Nelson Rockefeller. I met Barry Goldwater through that. And I stayed for a weekend with Winthrop Rockefeller at his ranch at Windrock. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
It confirmed the
In
rich
Arkansas.
are different.
In Arkansas.
The rich are different.
Yes.
Wow. Amazing.
So you were part of the Romney Exploratory Committee.
Yep.
Tell me, in your opinion, why did that campaign abort? Was it simply the Lou Gordon show and the brainwashing remark?
It was part of it.
Or would it have happened otherwise?
Well, but let me. Here's something about George Romney that I don't think too many people realize. George Romney did not really hunger and thirst after being president of the United States. His goal was to be one of the Council of 12 of the Mormon Church. His faith meant so much more to him than anything in politics ever did. That's what makes him even more remarkable when it came to the issue of, when he was governor, and the issue of legislation relating to alcohol. He would not sign it, but he wouldn't veto it. It would become law without his signature. I thought that was he said, "I am not going to impose my religious beliefs on the people of Michigan through a secular office." He was a very decent, honorable person, as was Bill Milliken.
So you thought these traits worked against him somewhat when he ran for president?
Yes. Now, people were very careful. They all understood. We explained in advance, please do not serve any alcoholic beverage to George or Lenore Romney. One time, in fact, at the Winthrop Rockefeller, they served Lenore a Bloody Mary, and she didn't want to offend anyone, so she stuck with, Peter, take care of this. Well, of course, I was an old-fashioned Methodist. I'm an abstainer also, so I had to quietly pour it into a potted plant that was nearby. So a lot of fun.
But so there was some of the hurly-burly and rough and tumble of national presidential politics that the Romneys just didn't quite fit into.
Right, correct.
Okay.
And George Romney, I spent a lot of time with him after all of that was over, after he was governor and everything, after he was sort of retired from active public life, and he had not one syllable of regret because he was still involved with the Mormon Church, and that was so important to him.